The hiss of the espresso machine was the soundtrack to my life now. Steam, the smell of burnt coffee, and the polite, empty smiles I gave to strangers. 6 months after my surgery, this was my world. A noisy cafe, a dull ache in my side, and an even duller ache in my heart. I was on autopilot, my movements mechanical as I frothed milk and wiped down the counter. And then they walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and my world stopped. Brian and my sister Susan. They were laughing, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. They looked happy, healthy. Susan glowed, basking in his attention, the way she'd always wanted to. They didn't see me. They were too busy being in their own perfect little world, the world they had stolen from me. My coworker, a teenager named Chloe, nudged me. "I've got this one," she whispered, seeing the look on my face. She knew my story. Everyone at this dead-end job did. But Brian's eyes scanned the counter and found me. His smile faltered for a second before he replaced it with a cool, distant politeness. "Laura, fancy seeing you here." Susan turned, and her face lit up with a brilliant, fake smile. "Laura, oh my gosh, this is where you work? It's cute." She made the word cute sound like pathetic. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. But I was trapped behind the counter, my ugly brown apron my uniform of shame. "What can I get for you?" I asked, my voice flat and empty. "I'll have a large latte," Susan said, leaning against the counter. She held up her left hand, making sure I could see the diamond ring glittering on her finger. The ring Brian had picked out with me. "And he'll have a black coffee. He has to watch his sugar now, you know. Doctor's orders." She looked at me for a reaction, a little spark of cruelty in her eyes. She was reminding me that I gave him his health, and she was the one enjoying it. As I turned to make their drinks, my hands trembled so badly, I almost spilled the hot coffee. I could hear them whispering. Not quietly enough. "She looks terrible," Susan murmured. "So thin." "What do you expect?" Brian replied, his voice low. "Just get the coffee and let's go." I finished their drinks and placed them on the counter, refusing to look at them. "That will be $9.50. Brian fumbled for his wallet. In the corner of my eye, I saw a man sitting alone at a small table. He was wearing a simple, dark suit and reading a newspaper, but I could feel his eyes on us. He seemed to be watching the whole, horrible scene unfold. It made my skin prickle. "Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you're watching from." Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. Susan put her hand on Brian's arm, stopping him. "It's okay, honey, I've got it," she said sweetly. She pulled a crisp $50 bill from her purse and slid it across the counter. "Keep the change," she said to me, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. It wasn't an act of kindness. It was an act of pity, of power. They took their coffees and walked away, leaving me standing there, humiliated and shaking. My manager shot me a sympathetic look from across the room. I had 5 minutes left in my shift. 5 minutes to hold myself together before I could run to the bathroom and fall apart. I started wiping down the counter where they had stood, trying to erase any trace of them. My tears blurred my vision, and one escaped, sliding down my hot cheek. I angrily wiped it away. That's when I saw it. The man from the corner table was gone. But he'd left something behind, right next to the spot where Susan's $50 bill had been. It was a small, plain white card. I picked it up. There was no company logo, no fancy design. Just a name, Julian Croft, and a phone number printed in simple black letters. I stared at it confused. I almost crumpled it up and threw it in the trash with the rest of the day's garbage. Just another piece of litter in my messy life. But then my phone, sitting on the shelf under the counter, started to buzz. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. My heart pounded. Maybe it was Brian calling to apologize. A stupid, hopeful thought. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello." There was a pause, and then a calm, deep voice spoke, a voice that sounded like it was used to being obeyed. Laura Miller? Yes. I whispered. My name is Julian Croft, the voice said. I was just in your cafe. I saw what happened, and I have a proposition for you. I frowned, my mind reeling.
A proposition?
Yes, he said, his tone perfectly serious. A marriage proposition. The phone felt cold against my ear. A buzzing silence filled the space between his words and my understanding. A marriage proposition? I repeated, my voice a broken whisper. It had to be a joke. A cruel, twisted prank someone was playing on the broken girl from the coffee shop. I am completely serious, he said, his voice steady and calm.
It was the calm that scared me.
It was too sure of itself. My breath hitched. I couldn't do this. I couldn't deal with one more strange, horrible thing today. Without another word, I ended the call and slammed my phone down on the counter, my hand shaking. The white card with his name on it seemed to mock me. Julian Croft.
Who was he?
And what kind of sick game was he playing? I finished my shift in a daze, my mind replaying the word marriage over and over again. It echoed in my head on the bus ride home, a painful drumbeat against the rhythm of the rattling windows. Marriage was a dream I used to have, a dream that died on a hospital bed while I was sleeping. The dream felt so real back then. It was a little over a year ago, on a sunny afternoon in a park. The blanket was spread out on the grass, and a basket of food sat between us. Brian was healthy then. His skin was full of life. His laugh was loud and easy. He wasn't the ghost he'd become before the surgery, or the cruel stranger he was now. He was the man I loved with my whole heart. He just told a stupid joke, and I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. He watched me, a soft, warm look in his eyes. My sister, Susan, was there too, sitting off to the side, picking at a sandwich. She'd insisted on coming along. What? I asked Brian, wiping a tear of laughter from my eye. Nothing, he said, reaching across the blanket to take my hand. It's just, I want to see you this happy, every day for the rest of my life. My heart did a little flutter. It was cheesy, but it was our kind of cheesy. Then he got down on one knee, right there in the middle of the park. My breath caught in my throat. He pulled out a little velvet box. The ring inside was the one I'd pointed out weeks before, the one I never thought he'd remember. Laura Miller, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. Yes, I choked out. Yes, of course, yes. He slid the ring on my finger, and it was perfect. The whole world felt perfect. In the background, I heard Susan clap, a slow, measured sound. I turned to her, my face glowing, expecting to see her sharing my joy. But the smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were fixed on the ring, a strange, hungry look in them. Wow, she said, her voice a little too bright. Congratulations. You two are just like a fairy tale. I hope you know how lucky you are, Laura. At the time, I thought she was just being emotional. I hugged her tightly, smelling the familiar scent of her shampoo. I didn't see the envy coiling behind her smile. I didn't understand that to her. My luck was her loss. Now, sitting in my tiny, dark apartment, the memory was a knife twisting in my gut. The apartment was full of boxes I never had the heart to unpack. They were full of the life I was supposed to have. Dishes for our new kitchen. A photo album I had started for a wedding. It was all junk now. Reminders of a future that had been stolen. I sank onto my lumpy couch, the silence pressing in on me. I was so alone. My parents had died years ago, leaving me and Susan with only each other. We were supposed to be a team, but she had chosen him. Or maybe he had chosen her. I didn't know which was worse. A sudden, sharp knock on my door made me jump. My heart leaped into my throat. It was late. I never had visitors. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. It was him, the man from the cafe, Julian Croft. He was standing in the dim hallway of my rundown building, his dark suit looking completely out of place. How did he find me? How did he know where I lived? Fear warred with a strange, Tired curiosity. I was too exhausted to be properly scared. I unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. What do you want? He didn't try to force his way in. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. I apologize for the phone call, he said, his voice the same deep, steady tone from before. It was too direct. May I come in for a moment? I promise I'm not a threat to you. Something in his eyes, a flicker of sincerity, made me do something stupid. I opened the door wider and let him in. He stepped inside, and my small living room seemed to shrink around him. He took in the unpacked boxes, the bare walls, the general sense of defeat that hung in the air. He didn't show pity, just observation. How did you find my address? I asked, hugging my arms to my chest. I have resources, he said simply, as if that explained everything. Laura, I meant what I said. I want to propose a marriage agreement. I let out a bitter laugh. An agreement? You saw me for 5 minutes in a coffee shop. You don't even know me. Why would you want to marry me? I know enough, he said, his gaze intense. I saw a woman who gave everything for someone she loved, only to be thrown away. I saw a fighter who gets up every day and goes to a job she hates because she has to survive. I see resilience. His words were like a physical touch, unnerving and yet nice. No one had said anything kind to me in so long. That's not an answer, I said, my voice shaking a little. What do you really want? He took a small step closer, but kept a respectful distance. I need a wife. For business reasons. It's a temporary arrangement. 1 year. We would be married in name only. You would have your own space, your own life. There would be no other expectations. I stared at him, trying to find the trick. This was insane. And what would I get out of this insane agreement? A solution, he said softly. He seemed to know he was walking on thin ice. I know about the medical debt from your surgery. The bills Brian was supposed to take care of. I know they're threatening to take you to court. The air left my lungs. He knew everything. The shame of it washed over me. The angry letters, the threatening phone calls. It was my secret humiliation. I will pay all of it, he continued, his voice gentle. I will give you a place to live where you feel safe. I will give you the freedom to quit that job and decide what you want to do with your life. All I ask for in return is that for 1 year, you be Mrs. Croft. My mind was spinning.
It was a lifeline.
A crazy, unbelievable lifeline. But people like him didn't give away things for free. There was always a catch. Why me? I whispered. You're you. You could have anyone you want. Because you're not anyone, he said, and for the first time, his calm expression softened. Anyone else would want my money or my name. You don't want anything. You just want to be left alone to heal. And because, he added, his voice dropping lower, what they did to you was wrong. They tried to break you. I want to see you put yourself back together. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him to get out.
This was too much, too fast.
My life was a mess, and he was offering a perfectly wrapped solution that felt like it had to be a bomb in disguise. I opened my mouth to tell him no, to tell him he was crazy, and to leave me alone in my misery. But he just gave a small, sad smile. You don't have to give me an answer now, he said, pulling another one of his plain white cards from his pocket and placing it on top of a dusty box. Think about it. When you're ready, call me. And with that, he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I was left alone in the sudden silence, staring at the card. My heart was pounding, a wild, terrified bird in my chest.
He was right.
It was a business deal, an escape, a chance to take back a piece of the life that had been ripped away from me. But could I really trade one cage for another, even if it was a gilded one? I looked around at my sad little apartment, at the boxes full of broken dreams, and for the first time in 6 months, a tiny, dangerous spark of hope flickered to life inside me. For 3 days, the little white card sat on the box, a silent dare. I tried to ignore it. I went to work, frothed milk, and smiled my empty smile. I told myself I didn't need a crazy billionaire's help. I had survived the worst thing that could ever happen. I could survive this. I was a fighter. I was resilient. Then I came home to a notice taped to my door. It was bright orange, the color of a warning. The words were simple and brutal. Eviction. I had 2 weeks. The legal threats from the hospital's collection agency had finally become real. My manager at the cafe had already pulled me aside, her face full of pity, to tell me they'd received a notice that my wages were going to be garnished. Most of my tiny paycheck would be gone before I ever saw it. I tore the notice off the door and crumpled it in my fist. The paper was stiff and sharp against my palm. I slid to the floor in the hallway, my back against the cheap wood of my own front door, and for the first time in months, I truly let myself cry. It wasn't a quiet, sad cry. It was a raw, ugly sob that tore through my chest. I had given a part of my body to save a man's life, and in return, I was going to lose everything. My job, my home, the last little bit of dignity I had left. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a harsh, angry sound. I pulled it out, expecting another call from the debt collectors. But it was Susan. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't spoken to her since the day in the cafe. I almost declined the call, but a dark, weary need to know what she wanted made me answer. "What?" I said, my voice thick from crying. "Laura?" "Oh, thank God," she said, and for the first time in a long time, I heard real panic in her voice. It wasn't fake or manipulative. It was the sound of pure fear. Something's wrong with Brian. I felt a dizzying wave of sickness and anger. "That's not my problem anymore," I said, my voice cold. "Yes, it is," she snapped, the panic turning to her usual sharp tone. "It's the kidney. His body, it's not working right. The doctors said his levels are off. They want to see you. They need to run some tests on the donor." I closed my eyes. Of course. Even now, I was just the donor. A resource. A spare part. "No," I said. "What do you mean, no?" She shrieked into the phone. "Laura, this is his life. You can't just say no. You wanted him to be healthy, didn't you? This is part of it. You owe him this." There it was, the real Susan, twisting my love, my sacrifice, into an obligation. She wasn't just scared of losing him. She was scared of losing the life he gave her. The life she stole from me. "I don't owe him anything," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "I have nothing left to give." Before she could argue, I hung up. I sat in the silent hallway, the crumpled eviction notice in one hand and my phone in the other. Susan's terrified, selfish words echoed in my head. They wanted more. They would always want more from me. And I was about to be on the street with nothing. Julian Croft's offer wasn't a lifeline anymore. It was the only option I had left. My hands were shaking as I found his card and dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. "Laura," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "I'll do it," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'll marry you, but I have conditions." There was a short pause. "I'm listening." "The debt from the hospital," I started, taking a shaky breath. "It's not just about me. They put a lien on my aunt's house. She's the only family I have left who is still family. You have to make that go away. Not just pay it, but erase it. So they can never come after her." "Consider it done," he said, his voice calm and certain. "What else?" "1 year. To the day," I said. "And you're right, it's a contract. This is not a rescue. I'm not some damsel in distress. This is a business deal between 2 adults." I was saying it as much for me as for him. "I agree," he said. "Meet me in 1 hour. I'll text you the address. We'll sign the papers and take care of everything." An hour later, I was standing in front of a quiet, respectable-looking law office in a part of town I'd never been to. Inside, Julian was waiting with a lawyer. He was dressed in another dark suit, and he looked just as out of place here as he did in my apartment building. He nodded at me, a serious look in his eyes. There were no false smiles, no empty words of comfort. He simply gestured to a large wooden table where a set of documents was laid out. "This is a prenuptial agreement," the lawyer, a kind-faced older woman, explained gently. "It protects both of your assets. And this," she pushed another document forward, is a contract outlining the terms you and Mr. Croft discussed. 1 year of marriage, in exchange for which he will settle all outstanding medical debts and secure the deed to your aunt's property. I read through it, my heart pounding. It was all there in black and white. It was cold and legal, but it was also my salvation. I looked at Julian, who was watching me with that same intense, unreadable expression. On his side of the table was a single framed photo, turned slightly away from me. I could just see the edge of it. A woman with dark hair, laughing. "Everything is in order," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt heavy in my hand. With one signature, I was selling a year of my life. I was tying myself to a stranger. But I was also saving myself and saving my aunt. I signed my name, Laura Miller, for the last time. As soon as the ink was dry, Julian made a phone call. I listened as he spoke in a low, commanding voice, giving account numbers and wire instructions. Within 10 minutes, it was done. A mountain of debt that had been crushing me for 6 months was gone.
Just like that.
I felt a wave of dizziness. "Thank you," I managed to say. "It was part of our agreement," he said simply. He stood up. "I'll take you home." The ride back to my apartment was silent. I didn't know what to say to him. What do you say to the man who just bought you? When we pulled up outside my building, I saw a familiar car parked at the curb. My stomach twisted into a knot. Brian and Susan were standing on the sidewalk, waiting for me. Before I could even think, Julian was out of the car and walking around to my side, opening my door. He stood there, a solid, immovable presence between me and them. "Laura, we need to talk to you," Brian said, taking a step forward. He looked stressed, dark circles under his eyes. This was the first time I'd seen a crack in his new, happy life. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. Susan scoffed, her eyes darting between me and Julian, taking in his expensive car and perfect suit. "And who are you?" she asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. Julian didn't look at her. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. I was so tired of fighting them alone. He turned his gaze back to them, and the temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "I'm Julian Croft," he said. "Laura's fiancé." The word fiancé hung in the air like a bomb. Susan's mouth fell open. Brian looked like he'd been punched. "Fiancé," Susan repeated, her voice a high-pitched squeak. "Laura, what is this? Who is this man? You can't be serious." She looked at me, her eyes wild with a mix of jealousy and confusion. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand the idea of me having something, or someone, that she couldn't have. "Laura's medical decisions are her own," Julian continued, his voice cutting through her panic. "And from now on, any communication you wish to have with her will go through me." He placed a light hand on the small of my back, a simple gesture of protection that sent a strange shiver through me. "Now, if you'll excuse us." He guided me past them, his presence a shield against their shocked stares. We walked into my building and didn't stop until my apartment door was closed and locked behind us. I leaned against it, my legs feeling like they might give out. I had just traded one complicated life for another. "They won't bother you again tonight," he said. I looked up at him, at this stranger who was now my future husband. He had fulfilled his end of the bargain. He had given me safety, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time, a small, fragile sense of peace. But as I looked at my phone later that night, the peace shattered. A news alert popped up on the screen, the headline stark and shocking. "Billionaire Julian Croft announces engagement to local barista." Below it was a picture of him, handsome and powerful, and a grainy, terrible photo of me, probably taken from my old social media. My private hell had just become a public spectacle. My escape had landed me in a brand new cage, one with glass walls for the whole world to look through. And I had a feeling that Brian and Susan were just getting started. The world found out about me overnight. My phone was a hot, vibrating brick in my hand, buzzing with notifications from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old high school friends, distant cousins, former coworkers, all crawling out of the woodwork to ask if the news was true. They didn't ask if I was okay. They just wanted to know about the billionaire. I felt like an exhibit in a zoo, a strange creature suddenly on display. I turned the phone off and tossed it onto the couch, the silence that followed feeling louder than the noise. A polite knock on the door made me jump. It was Julian. He wasn't in a suit today, just simple dark pants and a soft-looking sweater. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a normal person, which was somehow more unnerving. "I figured you'd want to get out of here," he said, his eyes glancing at the eviction notice still crumpled on my small table. "I have a place for you. It's quiet. You'll be safe there." I didn't have anything to pack except for a few clothes and the box of broken dreams I couldn't bring myself to throw away. He carried it for me, not saying a word about its contents. His car was warm and smelled faintly of leather and something clean like rain. We drove out of the city, away from the gray apartment buildings and into a neighborhood where the houses were hidden behind old stone walls and tall trees. His house wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a cold, modern box of glass and steel. It was an old stone manor, covered in ivy, with a heavy wooden door that looked like it had been there for 100 years. Inside, it was quiet and dim, filled with dark wood, worn velvet furniture, and shelves overflowing with books. It felt less like a billionaire's home and more like a library that someone happened to live in. It was beautiful, but it was lonely, a deep, echoing loneliness that seemed to soak into the very walls. "These will be your rooms," he said, leading me up a wide, curving staircase to a private wing. It wasn't just a bedroom, but a small apartment within the house, with its own sitting area and a large bathroom. It was lovely, and it was a clear message. This is your space, and that is mine. This is a business deal. I spent the next few days in a daze, wandering the quiet halls of the huge house. Julian was mostly gone during the day, and I was left alone with my thoughts and a kind, silent housekeeper who would leave meals for me. The safety he promised felt real, but it was the safety of a cage. A beautiful, comfortable cage. The news cycle moved on, but the damage was done. My old life was completely gone. Then the whispers started. A former coworker sent me a screenshot of a conversation. It was a group chat of people I used to know. Susan was in it. She was telling everyone a story. In her version, I was a cruel, unstable gold digger. She claimed I had demanded Brian's family pay for my donation, and when they couldn't meet my price, I had abandoned him and found a richer target. "She always was dramatic," one person commented. "And so jealous of you." But another wrote, asterisk, "I don't know, it is kind of weird she got engaged so fast. It looks bad, asterisk." The poison was spreading. Susan wasn't just satisfied with taking my life. She wanted to destroy my name, too. I was sitting by a window, staring out at the manicured garden, when Julian came home. He found me with tears silently streaming down my face. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just stood there for a moment before saying, "We have to go out tonight. A charity dinner. It's important that we're seen together." I shook my head. I can't face people. "They're just whispers, Laura," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "The only way to fight them is to show them they don't have power over you." He knelt in front of me, forcing me to meet his eyes. "I will be with you the entire time. I won't let anything happen to you." A few hours later, a woman with a kind smile arrived with a rack of dresses. I chose a simple one, a deep blue that felt like armor. As I was getting ready, I fumbled with the clasp of a delicate silver necklace Julian had left for me. My hands were shaking too much. He appeared in the doorway of my sitting room. "May I?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He stepped behind me, and I watched his reflection in the mirror. His fingers brushed against the back of my neck as he secured the clasp. The touch was light, professional, but it sent a jolt of heat through my entire body. For a split second, we met each other's eyes in the mirror. His expression was intense, unreadable. The moment passed as quickly as it came, but it left me breathless. The charity gala was a sea of glittering jewels and fake smiles. I felt like an imposter, a little brown bird in a flock of peacocks. I stayed close to Julian's side, my hand clutching his arm like a lifeline. He introduced me to people whose names I immediately forgot, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. He made it seem so easy, so natural. For a little while, I almost believed it. I almost felt like I belonged there with him. It was a dangerous feeling. And then I saw them, across the crowded ballroom, Brian and Susan. Susan was wearing a bright red dress, a splash of garish color in the elegant room. She was scanning the crowd, a hungry look on her face. Her eyes found mine, and she smiled, a sharp, predatory smile. She grabbed Brian's arm and started pulling him through the crowd towards us. Brian looked pale and uncomfortable, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. The healthy glow he'd had in the coffee shop was gone, replaced by a sickly, waxy sheen under the ballroom lights. "Laura, there you are," Susan said, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "We've been so worried. You just disappeared." "We're fine, Susan," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Julian's hand tightened on my back. "This is not the time or the place," he said, his voice a low warning. "Oh, I think it is," Susan shot back, her eyes fixed on Julian. "You need to know who you're really marrying. She's not the saint she pretends to be." Brian finally spoke, his voice weak and raspy. "Laura, please. I need to talk to you. The doctors, they need you to come in for more tests. There are problems with the kidney." He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "It's my life, Laura. You can't just turn your back on me." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. A wave of dizziness washed over me. All the whispers, all the lies, all the pressure, it was all closing in on me. I felt the room start to tilt. "That's enough," Julian said. His voice was completely calm, but it cut through the noise like a knife. He took a small step forward, shielding me. He looked directly at Brian, his gaze cold and dissecting. "You were given a gift you spat on. You have no right to ask for anything more from her. Her health, her body, and her life are no longer your concern. If you or your wife attempt to contact her again, you will be dealing with my lawyers. Is that clear?" Brian shrank back, speechless. Susan's face was a mask of furious disbelief. They were so used to me being weak, to me backing down. They had no idea how to handle someone who fought back. Without another word, Julian guided me away, leaving them standing there, exposed and defeated in the middle of the crowded room. As we walked out into the cool night air, I leaned against him, taking a deep, shaky breath. He had protected me. He had stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. In that moment, the line between our business arrangement and something real felt dangerously thin. Back at the quiet, lonely house, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving me exhausted but strangely peaceful. Julian poured me a glass of water and left me in the library, a vast room with walls of books that reached the high ceiling. "Get some rest," he said, before disappearing into his office down the hall. I couldn't rest. My mind was too alive. I felt safe. For the first time, truly safe. I wandered along the shelves, my fingers trailing over the leather-bound spines, looking for anything to read that would calm my thoughts. I passed his office and saw the door was ajar, a single lamp casting a warm glow on his large, dark wood desk. He wasn't there. He must have gone upstairs. On the corner of the desk, a leather folder was left open. I wouldn't have looked twice, but a familiar name on the top page caught my eye. Kennedy, Brian. Curiosity, a cold and sharp thing, pulled me in. It was a report. A private investigator's report, filled with details about Brian's finances, his medical history, Susan's spending habits. It was a complete invasion of their lives. But that wasn't the shocking part. I flipped back a page. The report was thick. I looked at the date on an earlier entry. It was from 2 years ago, long before Brian got sick, long before he proposed to me. My blood ran cold. Why would Julian be investigating them back then? My fingers trembled as I saw another file underneath. It had my name on it, Miller, Laura. It was just as thick, filled with details of my life I had forgotten. old addresses, jobs, even notes about my parents. He had been watching me, too.
Then I saw it.
Tucked into the side pocket of the folder was a photograph. It was the same one I'd seen in the lawyer's office, the one of the laughing woman with dark hair. This time, I could see it clearly. I pulled it out. She was beautiful, her eyes full of life. On the back, there was a handwritten note. Asterisk Eleanor Croft. 1982-2015. Asterisk. Underneath the photo was a single, folded document. It was a copy of a death certificate. Eleanor Croft. Cause of death: kidney failure. A deep, primal horror crept up my spine, cold and suffocating. I frantically scanned the document, my eyes searching for a connection, for anything that would make sense of this. And then I found it. A small line of text near the bottom, listing next of kin. Surviving relative, Brian Kennedy, nephew. The air left my lungs in a silent scream. Julian wasn't a stranger who happened to be in a coffee shop. He wasn't a savior. He was Eleanor's brother. And Brian was his nephew. This wasn't a rescue. It was a plan. A cold, calculated plan that had been in motion for years. And I wasn't his partner. I was just a piece in his game. The most important piece. The one with the healthy kidney. My fingers went numb. The name on the paper, Brian Kennedy, nephew, blurred as my vision swam. The house, which had felt like a quiet sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. Every shadow in the corners of the library seemed to lengthen, reaching for me. He had been watching me for years. He knew Brian. He was his uncle. This wasn't a chance meeting in a coffee shop. It was the closing of a trap that had been set for me long ago. I shoved the papers and the photograph back into the folder, my movements clumsy and loud in the suffocating silence. I had to get out of the room before he came back. I had to pretend I knew nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird beating itself against the bars of a cage. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the truth was a physical weight crushing my chest. I stumbled back to the armchair by the fireplace, sinking into it, trying to force my body to be still, to look normal. But how could anything ever be normal again? The door to the office clicked open. Julian walked out and my entire body went rigid. He saw me, and a small frown touched his lips. He came over and knelt in front of my chair, the same way he had before the gala. His eyes searched my face with an unnerving intensity. "You're still shaken," he said, his voice a low murmur. He thought I was upset about Brian and Susan. The lie was so much bigger than that. So much worse. "I'm fine," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Just tired." "I know," he said softly. "What they put you through tonight, it was cruel." He reached out, and his thumb gently brushed away a tear I didn't even know had fallen. His touch was warm, steady. It was the touch of a protector, the touch of a liar. A wave of nausea rolled through me. "I want you to know something, Laura," he continued, his gaze holding mine. "My sister, Eleanor, she was sick for a very long time. I watched her fade away, powerless to stop it. I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer." He was using her, using the memory of his dead sister to trick me, to make me feel close to him. My stomach twisted with a grief so profound it almost choked me. I was mourning a woman I'd never met, and I was mourning the man I thought he was. "I couldn't save her," he said, and for the first time, a crack appeared in his perfect calm. A flicker of real, raw pain was there in his eyes. "But I will not stand by and watch someone else destroy you. I won't let you be broken. I promise." He leaned in closer, and the space between us disappeared. His scent filled my senses, clean and warm. He was going to kiss me. I could see it in his eyes, a deep, consuming fire that had nothing to do with business. For one insane second, I wanted him to. I wanted to fall into the lie, to pretend the man in front of me was real, that this safety was real. It would be so much easier than the truth. But the cold edge of the death certificate I'd held in my hand was like a shard of ice in my memory. I turned my head just as his lips were about to touch mine. His breath ghosted across my cheek. He pulled back slowly, his eyes questioning. The moment was broken. The spell was shattered. I couldn't do it. I couldn't live inside the lie for one more second. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked back to his office. I reached into the folder on his desk and pulled out the photograph of Eleanor. I turned back to face him, holding it out. My hand was shaking so hard the image rattled. "She's beautiful," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Who was she to you?" Julian's face became a blank mask. All warmth, all vulnerability, vanished. "She was my sister," he said, his tone flat. "And who was she to Brian Kennedy?" I pressed, my voice gaining a sharp, brittle edge. He didn't answer. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, calculating. "You knew," I whispered, the terrible truth finally spilling out. "You knew all along. That day in the cafe, it wasn't an accident, was it?" "None of it was." "No," he said, the single word echoing in the cavernous room. "It wasn't." The confession, so simple and so cold, knocked the air from my lungs. "My relationship with Brian," I started, my voice breaking. "Meeting him, falling in love with him, was that you?" "I introduced them," he stated, as if he were discussing a stock purchase. "I made sure their paths would cross. I knew his character. I knew yours. I knew you would be drawn to someone you thought you could save." Every happy memory I had of Brian turned to poison. The first date, the proposal in the park, the nights we spent dreaming of our future, it was all scripted. It was a play, and I was the only one who didn't know I was acting. My love hadn't been real. It had been manufactured. "Why?" I choked out, wrapping my arms around myself. The house suddenly felt cold, the chill seeping into my bones. "Why would you do that?" "My sister needed a kidney," he said, his voice devoid of emotion.
She had a rare tissue type.
The odds of finding a match were less than 1 in a million. I have considerable resources. I used them to search for that one person. It was you, Laura. You were a perfect match for Eleanor. I stared at him, my mind refusing to accept it. "So, you were just going to what? Ask me to give my kidney to a stranger?" "The plan was more delicate than that," he said. "But it didn't matter. Eleanor died before we could move forward. A sliver of insane relief cut through my horror. So it was over. A terrible plan that never came to be. But his next words killed that hope completely. "Then Brian got sick," he said. "The same genetic condition. It seemed my sister's son was destined for the same fate." His eyes, cold and dark, locked onto mine. "But I still had you. The perfect match. A resource waiting to be used. I couldn't force you, but I could create a situation where you would offer it willingly. Where it would be your idea. Your grand sacrifice of love." The word resource hung in the air between us. He didn't see me. He saw a collection of compatible organs. He saw a solution to his problem. My sister's betrayal, Brian's cruelty, Julian hadn't just watched to happen.
He had counted on it.
He had used Susan's jealousy and Brian's weakness as tools to isolate me, to break me down until I had nothing and no one left but Brian, the man who needed a piece of me to live. "You are a monster," I whispered, the words feeling small and useless against the scale of his deception. He didn't even flinch. "I am a man who protects his family. By any means necessary." The final, horrifying question clawed its way at my throat. I had to know. "And this?" I asked, gesturing around the vast, empty room, at our fake life. "Marrying me? Paying my debts? Protecting me from them?"
"Why?"
"The deal is done. You got what you wanted. Brian has my kidney." A look crossed his face then, something darker and more terrifying than anything I had seen before. It was the look of a collector examining a prized possession. "Things are not always so simple," he said, taking a deliberate step towards me. "Brian's health is precarious. His body is not responding to the organ as well as we'd hoped. There are complications." I remembered Brian's pale face at the gala, his desperate plea for me to get tested. It hadn't just been a lie to get my attention. "The doctors have mentioned that in cases of rejection, the donor can be very useful," Julian continued, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone. "Further donations can be required. Plasma, bone marrow. It is best to have the original source readily available. The room tilted violently. The original source. An asset. My body wasn't my own. It was an insurance policy for the man who had stolen my life. This marriage wasn't a business deal. It was a contract of ownership. He had bought me, not for a year, but for as long as his nephew might need me for spare parts. The safety he had promised was a lie. This house wasn't a sanctuary, it was a holding cell. I took a step back, then another, until my back hit the cold, hard shelves of books. There was nowhere to run. I looked at this man, this stranger, and saw my future. I was completely and utterly alone, trapped in a gilded cage with a monster who had built it just for me. My entire world narrowed to the space between us. The air grew thick and heavy, each breath a struggle. The man I had started to trust, the one who had felt like a shield, was the architect of my entire nightmare. His words weren't a confession. They were a statement of fact, as cold and hard as the marble floor beneath my feet. He had used my love as a weapon against me. He had used my compassion as a key to unlock a part of my body he felt entitled to. So all of it, I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. The money, the lawyers, this house, it's all just to keep me close, to keep your resource on ice. I am protecting my investment, he said, and the business-like words were more brutal than any insult. Brian is my only living blood relative. I will not lose him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw one of the heavy, leather-bound books at his head. But a chilling, paralyzing fear kept me rooted to the spot. I was completely powerless. He had thought of everything. He had paid my debts, but in doing so, he had entangled my finances with his own. My aunt's house, the only real home I had left in the world, was safe only because he had made it so. If I ran, he could undo it all with a single phone call. He could ruin me. He could ruin the one person I had left. He hadn't built me a cage of steel bars, but one of gratitude and obligation, and it was 1,000 times stronger. You can't keep me here, I said, the words sounding hollow and childish even to my own ears. I don't have to, he replied, his voice calm. You can walk out that door right now. But where would you go, Laura? Back to that apartment you were being evicted from? Back to that coffee shop where your wages were about to be taken? Susan and Brian have already poisoned every friend you had against you. To the world, you are either an unstable gold digger who latched onto me, or you are the cruel woman who abandoned my dying nephew. I control the story. I have made sure you have nowhere else to turn. Staying here, as Mrs. Croft, is the only logical choice. He was right. The realization was a slow, creeping cold that settled deep in my bones. Every path led back to him. Every choice was an illusion. My eyes darted around the beautiful, lonely library. It wasn't a home. It was a holding pen. A desperate, angry fire flickered inside me. I refused to be just a victim. I needed to understand the monster in front of me. I needed to know why. Your sister, I began, my voice shaking. Did she know? Did Eleanor know you were planning to ruin my life to save hers? For the first time, a shadow of something other than cold control crossed his face. It was a flicker of pain so deep and real it startled me. My sister was a good person, he said, his voice tight. She believed in kindness. She spent the last years of her life in and out of hospitals, always smiling, always telling everyone else to be brave. She would never have approved of my methods. So, you just waited until she was gone to become this? I accused, my voice rising. I did what was necessary, he snapped, the first crack in his icy calm. You talk about love and sacrifice as if they are feelings. They are not. They are actions. I am taking action to protect my family. It is a concept you should understand. The insult hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Before I could respond, a shrill, piercing sound cut through the silence. It was the house intercom. Julian walked over to a small panel on the wall and pressed a button. Sir, a tinny voice said, there is a woman at the gate. A Susan Miller. She is very distressed. She insists she must speak with Mrs. Croft. My blood ran cold. Susan. Here. Julian looked at me, a calculating glint in his eye. "Let her in," he commanded into the intercom. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I don't want to see her." "I think you do," he said, turning back to me. "It is important that you understand the full reality of your situation." Minutes later, the heavy front doors opened, and Susan burst into the room. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared down her cheeks, and her bright red dress from the gala was wrinkled. She looked wild, her eyes darting around the magnificent room before they landed on me. "Laura," she cried, rushing forward. She stopped short when she saw Julian standing near me, a silent and imposing guard. She ignored him, her focus entirely on me. "You have to come to the hospital."
Now.
Brian collapsed after we got home. "The doctors, they're saying the word rejection. His fever is spiking. They need to test you. They need to see if there's anything they can do." I stared at her, my mind a numb, buzzing void. This was it. The moment Julian had been waiting for. The reason he had bought and paid for my life. "It's always about what Brian needs, isn't it, Susan?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "It's never about what he did. It's never about what you did." Her face crumpled, the fake confidence replaced by raw, ugly desperation.
"Please, Laura. This isn't about that right now.
This is about his life. You can't let him die." "I love him." "You love the life he gives you." I shot back, the words like venom. "You love the money and the attention. You didn't love him enough to offer him one of your own perfectly good kidneys, did you?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair. I wasn't a match. You never even got tested," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "I know you didn't, because you were too scared, too selfish. It was always easier to let me do it, to let me be the hero, so you could swoop in and take the prize." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Okay? I'm sorry for everything. But he will die if you don't help. Is that what you want? Do you want to have his death on your conscience for the rest of your life?" There it was, the final turn of the screw. My morality, the one thing I had left that was truly mine, was being held hostage. I looked from my sister's desperate, tear-stained face to Julian's cold, watchful expression. He hadn't said a word.
He didn't need to.
His plan was unfolding perfectly. He knew me better than I knew myself. He knew that I couldn't stand by and watch someone die, not even Brian. My own goodness was my leash. "Get her out of here," I said, my voice flat and dead. I didn't look at Susan anymore. I looked at Julian. He gave a slight nod to a security guard who had appeared silently in the doorway. The guard gently took Susan's arm. She didn't fight. She just stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief and horror, as she was led away. The room was silent again. The ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a bomb counting down. I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of an impossible choice crushing me. If I said no, I was condemning a man to death. I would have to live with that knowledge forever. If I said yes, I was walking back into my cage and handing Julian the key. I was accepting my fate as a resource, a collection of spare parts. I closed my eyes, and all I could see was Brian in the park, down on one knee, his eyes full of a love I now knew was a lie. I saw my sister's jealous gaze on my ring, and I saw Julian, watching us all from the shadows, pulling the strings. They had all taken something from me. My future, my love, my trust, a piece of my body. And now they were asking for more. A strange, cold calm washed over me. It was the calm of absolute surrender. There was no way out. There was no good choice. There was only the least terrible one. "I'll go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I opened my eyes and met Julian's gaze. There was no triumph in his expression, only a quiet, chilling certainty. "I will go to the hospital. I will do the tests. Not for him. And not for you. I'm doing this because I am not a monster. I will not be like you." He simply nodded, as if my answer had been decided long ago. He walked over to a small table and picked up a light coat, holding it out for me. His movements were smooth, unhurried. As I slid my arms into the sleeves, He leaned in close, his voice a low murmur meant only for me. "I knew you would make the right choice," he said. The words were a soft caress, a final, perfect twist of the knife. "You are exactly the woman I thought you were." And in that moment, I felt the last flicker of hope die inside me. I was walking out of this beautiful prison and into another, and the man holding the door was the same one who had locked me in. I was trapped, not by walls or guards, but by my own heart. And he knew it. He had counted on it from the very beginning. The drive to the hospital was a silent war. Julian drove with a focused intensity, his hands steady on the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the blurred city lights, but I wasn't seeing them. I was seeing the chessboard. For the first time, I could see all the pieces, all the moves that had been made to corner me. My love, my sister's jealousy, my compassion, my debt. They were all just squares on a board, and Julian had moved me from one to the next with perfect, cold skill.
He thought he had me.
Checkmate. He was wrong. The fear was gone, burned away by the cold fire of my anger. The woman who had cried on her apartment floor was gone. The girl who gave away a piece of her body for a lie was gone. I didn't know who was left, but she was a stranger to me, and I had a feeling she was a stranger to him, too. I looked at his profile in the dim light of the dashboard. He was handsome, powerful, and completely hollow. A beautiful shell with a monster curled up inside. He had miscalculated. He thought my kindness was a weakness he could use. He never imagined it could be a weapon I could use, too. When we arrived, the hospital smelled the same. That sterile, chemical scent of antiseptic and quiet suffering.
It didn't make me feel sick this time.
It made me feel focused. Susan was waiting by the elevators, her face puffy and red. She ran towards me. "Laura, thank God. He's on the 4th floor. The doctor is waiting for you." I walked past her without a word. Julian followed, his presence a heavy shadow behind me. I could feel the eyes of Brian's parents as we passed the waiting room. They stared at me, their expressions a desperate mix of hope and blame. They saw me as a walking medicine cabinet, a solution to their problem. They didn't see me at all. We were led into a small, cold office. The doctor, a tired-looking man with gray hair, stood up to greet us. "Mrs. Croft," he said, nodding at me, then at Julian. "Thank you for coming. As I explained to Ms. Miller, Brian's body is in acute rejection. His system is attacking the new kidney. We've tried immunosuppressants, but his reaction is severe." "What do you need from her?" Julian asked, his voice calm and commanding. He was already taking over, speaking for me as if I were a child or a piece of property. "We need to run a full panel of tests," the doctor said, looking at me. "Given your compatibility, you are the most likely candidate for a bone marrow transplant. It could help his body learn to accept the organ. It's a serious procedure, but it has the highest chance of success." I listened to the words. Bone marrow. Another piece of me. Another sacrifice to save the man who had broken my life into a million pieces. This was the moment. The final move. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room like a stone. The doctor blinked, surprised. Julian's head snapped towards me, his eyes narrowing. "Laura, perhaps you don't understand the—" Julian started, his voice low and dangerous. I turned to him, my gaze as cold and hard as his. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I understand that you think this is your decision to make. It is not." I turned back to the doctor. "I will not be discussing my body or my medical choices with anyone but the patient. I want to speak with Brian, alone." "That is not advisable," Julian said, stepping forward. "He is not stable. Alone," I repeated, cutting him off. I held the doctor's gaze, willing him to see that I was not the hysterical woman they thought I was. "This is my condition. I will not consent to a single needle, not a single test, until I have spoken to Brian Kennedy. By myself." The doctor looked from me to Julian, caught in a silent battle of wills. He saw the look on my face, the absolute, unbending certainty. I wasn't asking. I was telling him. He gave a short, weary nod. "Very well. He's in room 412. He is weak, so please be brief." I walked out of the office without looking back. I could feel Julian's furious stare on my back, but I didn't care. His power over me was an illusion, built on my fear and my belief that I had no other choice. I was building my own choices now. Brian's room was dim, filled with the soft, rhythmic beeping of machines. He looked small in the hospital bed, his dark skin pale and waxy against the white sheets. Wires snaked from his arms, and a tube delivered oxygen to his nose. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as I approached. "Laura," he whispered, his voice a dry crackle. "You came." "I came," I said, stopping at the foot of his bed. I didn't get any closer. I didn't want him to think for a second that this was a visit of comfort. "Susan told me what you said," he rasped, trying to push himself up on his elbows.
About the tests.
"Laura, please. I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did was wrong, but I'm scared. I don't want to die." Tears welled in his eyes. The old me, the me from 6 months ago, would have rushed to his side. She would have taken his hand and told him everything would be okay. She would have promised to save him, no matter the cost. But she was dead. I had to be sure of it. "Do you love her?" I asked, my voice flat. He looked confused. "What?" "Susan," I said. "Do you love her?" He hesitated, his eyes flicking towards the door. The beeping of the heart monitor sped up slightly. "It's complicated," he mumbled. "No, it's not," I said. "It's a simple question. You destroyed my life for her. You took my love, my future, and a part of my body, and you gave it all to her. So, I want to know, was it worth it? Do you love her?" He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his temple. "She was there," he whispered. "When I was scared after the surgery, she was just there. And you weren't." The excuse was so pathetic, so selfish, it was almost laughable. He hadn't chosen her. He had chosen the easiest option. He had chosen the person who was right in front of him, telling him what he wanted to hear, while I was unconscious in another room, a fresh wound in my side from saving his life. "I won't let you die, Brian," I said, and his eyes shot open, full of a desperate, pathetic hope. I meant what I told Julian. I am not a monster. I took a breath, letting the next words settle in the air between us. "But my help has a price." His face fell. "Laura, I don't have any money." "Julian, I don't want money." I cut him off. "I want my life back. The life you and my sister stole from me. You're going to give it back." I leaned forward, my hands gripping the cold metal railing of the bed. "If I agree to these tests, if I agree to a transplant, you're going to do something for me. You're going to write a statement. A full confession. You will detail how you and Susan planned to be together while I was preparing for surgery. You will admit that you lied to me, that you used my love for you to get my kidney. You will explain that you abandoned me, leaving me with all the medical debt. And you will give that statement to the press. You will clear my name. You will tell the world that my sister is a thief and that you are a coward. You will set me free." His mouth hung open, his face a mask of horror. He was starting to understand. This wasn't about saving him. This was about saving me. "I can't," he whispered. "It would ruin me. It would ruin Susan." "You are already ruined," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You are lying in this bed, dying, because your body is rejecting a part of me that you were never worthy of in the first place. You and Susan built your happy little life on top of my broken one. Now you can choose. You can die with your secrets, or you can live with the truth. That's the price of my bone marrow. My name, my story, my truth." I stood up straight, my decision made. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was finally gone. It didn't matter what he chose. By giving him the choice, by taking control, I had already won. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him alone with his machines and his cowardice. Julian and Susan were standing in the hallway waiting. Susan's face was a mess of hope and fear. Julian's was a mask of stone. I walked right up to him. "Our agreement is over," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "You don't own me. I am not your asset. am not your investment. I am a person, and my body belongs to me. I looked at the faint, silvery scar that peeked out from the sleeve of my blouse, a reminder of my first mistake. Whatever choice Brian makes in that room, our deal is done. You will not touch my aunt's house. You will not come near me or my family again. Because if you do, I will add your name to Brian's confession. I will tell the world how the great Julian Croft orchestrated this entire nightmare just to get a spare part for his nephew. I wonder how your investors would feel about that. He stared down at me, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his cold eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was a sliver of something that looked like surprise, like respect. He had seen me as a pawn for so long, he had never considered that the pawn might just decide to knock the king off the board. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked away. I walked past my sobbing sister, past the accusing eyes in the waiting room, and out into the cool night air. I didn't know if Brian would choose to live. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. But as I walked down the hospital steps, alone and with nothing but the clothes on my back, I felt a deep, profound peace settle over me. I was free. I had sacrificed the last piece of my naive heart, the part of me that needed to be good. And in its place, a warrior had been born. I had finally saved the only person who mattered. Myself. I didn't run. I walked. Each step on the cold pavement was deliberate, a claim on my own freedom. The cool night air felt clean in my lungs, washing away the sterile scent of the hospital, the cloying smell of deceit. I had no phone, no money, and no idea where I was going. For the first time in my life, that felt like a victory. I was walking away from a life that had been chosen for me, and walking toward one I would build for myself, even if I had to lay the first brick on this very sidewalk. I expected to hear the sound of Julian's expensive car following me, to see its headlights cut through the darkness, like the eyes of a predator. But there was only silence. The city hummed around me, a symphony of distant sirens and rustling leaves, and I was just another anonymous person moving through it. I was gloriously, terrifyingly, beautifully anonymous. After about 20 minutes, a sleek, dark car did pull up beside me, its engine a low, expensive purr. It kept pace with me, the passenger window gliding down. It was Julian. I stopped walking but didn't look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on a flickering streetlight ahead, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I was ready for the threats, for the anger, for the final, desperate attempt to pull me back into his control. "Get in the car, Laura," he said. His voice was different. The cold, commanding edge was gone, replaced by something I couldn't identify. Something that sounded like exhaustion. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done taking orders from you." "I'm not giving an order," he said. There was a pause.
I'm asking.
"Please." The word please was so out of place coming from him that it made me turn. In the dim glow of the dashboard, his face was a landscape of shadows. He wasn't looking at me with anger or calculation. He looked broken. The mask was gone, and the man underneath was hollowed out by a grief so old it had turned to poison. He was holding a piece of paper in his hand. An old, yellowed letter. "When you walked out of that office," he said, his voice quiet, "you said you weren't a monster. You said you wouldn't be like me. You sounded just like her." He glanced down at the letter. My sister. For years, I told myself that my methods were justified, that I was honoring her by protecting the only piece of her I had left. I twisted her memory into an excuse to become a tyrant. I thought I was being strong. I was just being cruel. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a terrible, clear-eyed shame. "Eleanor left me this letter. I've had it since she died. I never read it. I couldn't. I thought it would be full of goodbyes, and I wasn't strong enough to hear them. But tonight, after you faced me, I finally opened it." He held it out to me. My hand didn't move to take it. "She knew," he said, his voice cracking. "Somehow, she knew I would try to do something like this. She knew my grief would make me reckless. The letter is a warning. She begs me not to interfere. She writes that a life saved through manipulation is not a life worth living. That true strength is letting go. that her son's life was his own to live or to lose, and that my job was to love him, not to own him. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The entire foundation of his monstrous plan, the justification for every lie and every moment of my pain, was built on a complete betrayal of his sister's final wish. He hadn't been honoring her. He had been spitting on her grave. After I read it, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I went back to Brian's room. Susan was in there, crying, begging him to do whatever it took. I asked her to leave. He took a shaky breath. I didn't tell Brian about your ultimatum. I just told him about his mother. I told him what she wrote. I told him what she believed. And I told him that for the first time, I was going to honor her wish. I gave him the confession you demanded and a pen. I told him the choice was his, to be the man his mother raised him to be or not. Then I left. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs. I stared at him, at this man who had single-handedly destroyed my life and was now, in a single moment, handing me the power to rebuild it. I didn't know what to feel. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but it was joined by a strange, aching pity for the man he could have been, for the brother who had loved his sister so much he had forgotten everything she had ever tried to teach him. My phone, which he must have brought from the house, began to buzz on the seat beside him. A news alert, then another.
And another.
Julian picked it up and angled the screen towards me. The headline was stark, explosive. Asterisk, Kennedy heir confesses to medical coercion in shocking tell-all. Asterisk. Below it was Brian's statement in full. Every lie, every betrayal, laid bare for the world to see. He detailed his relationship with Susan, her jealousy, his own weakness. He confessed to using my love to secure a kidney he knew he didn't deserve, and then abandoning me. My name was cleared. Not just cleared, it was lifted up. The story wasn't about a gold digger anymore. It was about a survivor. The hospital board is having an emergency meeting, Julian said, his voice flat. The story has been picked up by national news. They're talking about donor advocacy, about creating new laws to protect people from what they did to you. My small, private hell had erupted into a public cause. My victory wasn't just mine. It was becoming a shield for other people, a warning against the kind of darkness I had been forced to walk through. My pain was being forged into a purpose. The feeling was so overwhelming, so vast, that my knees felt weak. I finally leaned against the car, the cold metal a welcome support. What now? I whispered. Now you are free, Julian said. In every sense of the word. The house, the accounts, everything I used to trap you, it's all yours. Not as a deal, not as payment. It's restitution. It's a pathetic apology, but it's the only one I know how to make. He looked away, out into the darkness. I'm starting a foundation in Eleanor's name. Its sole purpose will be to provide legal and financial protection for organ donors, to make sure no one can ever be put in the position I put you in. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply laying down his arms. He was surrendering to the truth. Drive me to my aunt's house, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. He simply nodded and unlocked the door. The rest of the ride was silent. When we pulled up to the small, familiar house with its cheerful yellow door, he didn't get out. I opened my own door and stepped onto the curb. I was about to walk away without another word when he spoke. Laura. I stopped. He's going to live.
Brian.
He made his choice and you made yours. They're starting the tests for the transplant. I nodded once, a small, tight gesture. I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction. Brian Kennedy was just a ghost to me now, a part of a past that no longer had any power. What you did, Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. Standing up to me, standing up for yourself. Eleanor would have been proud of you. I looked at him then, one last time. I saw a man drowning in a grief he had finally allowed himself to feel. His journey was just beginning. Mine was, too. I turned and walked up the path to my aunt's front door, not looking back. The door swung open before I could knock, and she was there, her arms wrapping around me, pulling me into the safety and warmth of a love that was real, a love that had never asked for anything in return. I was home. I was finally truly home. The months that followed were quiet. I stayed with my aunt in the little house with a yellow door, wrapped in a blanket of ordinary days that felt like a miracle. I painted her fence, I learned how to bake bread, and I watched the seasons change through her kitchen window. The world outside roared for a while, my name and Brian's a constant buzz on the news. His confession had, as Julian predicted, started a fire. New laws were being debated. Donor rights became a national conversation. My pain had become a banner for change, a strange and bittersweet legacy. I never spoke to the press. I let the confession speak for me. My story was out there, and I was finally free of it. Brian lived. The transplant was a success. I read about it on my aunt's old tablet, a small article buried in the back pages of a news site. He and Susan had divorced. She had disappeared from public life completely, and he had moved to a quiet town up north, selling a share of the family business. He got to live, but the life he had betrayed me for was gone.
There was a quiet justice in that.
Julian kept his word. The house, the money, it was all transferred to an account in my name. I never touched it. It felt like blood money, the price of my own life. But I didn't give it back. I left it sitting there, a silent monument to what I had survived. He also kept his word about the foundation. The Eleanor Croft Foundation became his entire world. I saw him on the news sometimes, not looking like a powerful billionaire, but like a tired man on a mission. He spoke of his sister with a gentle reverence, and of the foundation's work with a quiet, fierce passion. He was using his power not to control, but to protect. He was becoming the man his sister had wanted him to be. One crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. It was from Susan. My aunt left it on the kitchen table for me and went out to give me space. For an hour, I just stared at it, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I almost threw it away, but I knew I couldn't move forward until I closed the final door to my past. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was just a broken, rambling account of a lifetime of jealousy. She wrote about being the shadow, the twin who was never quite as bright. She wrote about how my light had made her feel cold. She'd wanted my life, my joy, my love, so badly that she had convinced herself she deserved it. I broke you because I didn't know how to fix myself, she wrote. Asterisk, there is no excuse for what I did. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see the ugliness in me. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to learn how to be a person on my own. I hope one day you find all the happiness I tried to take from you. Goodbye, Laura, asterisk. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. I didn't cry. The gaping wound she had left in my life had finally scarred over. There was no going back to what we were, but with her words, the hate that had taken root in my heart finally withered and died. I could let her go. The following spring, on the one-year anniversary of the surgery, I did something I thought I'd never do. I took the bus back to my old neighborhood. It looked smaller, grayer than I remembered. I walked down the familiar street, my steps steady, and then I saw it. The coffee shop. The hiss of the espresso machine was just a faint sound from the open door. I saw a girl behind the counter with bright pink hair, laughing with a customer. My old life felt like a movie I had watched a long time ago. I felt no pain, no shame, just a distant, quiet peace. I had survived this place. I was about to turn and walk away when I saw him. Julian was sitting on a park bench across the street, the same park where Brian had proposed to me. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just a simple pair of jeans and a dark coat. He was throwing breadcrumbs to a flock of pigeons, his movements slow and thoughtful. He looked up as if he felt my eyes on him, and our gazes met across the street. My heart didn't pound with fear. It gave a soft, questioning little flutter. I crossed the street and stopped a few feet from his bench.
Laura, he said.
He didn't seem surprised to see me. Julian, I replied. We stood in a silence that wasn't awkward, just calm. The foundation seems to be doing good work, I said. A small, sad smile touched his lips. It's a start, he said. It's the only work that matters to me now. He looked at me, his eyes clear and direct, with no hidden shadows. I never properly apologized. For everything. For the pain I caused you. For the choices I stole from you. I am truly sorry. I know, I said. And I did. I could see the apology in the way he carried himself, in the exhaustion in his eyes, in the purpose he had found. He gestured to the spot on the bench next to him. I was just thinking about my sister. We used to come to this park when we were kids. Before all the money. Before the world got so complicated. He paused, looking out at the trees, their new leaves a bright, hopeful green. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said. About how you're not a monster. You were right. My grief turned me into one. I'm trying to find my way back. I sat down next to him, leaving a careful space between us. It was strange to be sitting here with this man, in this place after everything. The anger was gone. All that was left was a deep, quiet understanding. We were two survivors, scarred by the same tragedy, even if he had been the one holding the knife. The Foundation's board is expanding, he said, turning to me. We need a new director of donor advocacy. Someone who understands the mission from the inside. Someone with integrity. Someone strong. He looked at me, a hopeful, hesitant light in his eyes. It's a real job, Laura. With a real salary. Your voice could protect so many people. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I was hoping you would consider it. He was offering me a purpose. Not a cage, not a deal, but a chance to turn my scars into a shield for others. It was the only thing he could have offered that I might have accepted. The old me would have said yes immediately, eager to please, eager to be useful. But I wasn't her anymore. I looked away from him, my gaze falling on a little cafe across the street, a new one I'd never seen before, its windows bright and clean. An idea, a spark I hadn't felt in years, flickered to life inside me. A dream that was all my own. I'll think about it, I said, and for the first time, I felt the truth of my own power. My future was my choice. He nodded, accepting my answer without question. He had learned his lesson. I stood up, ready to leave, ready to start my new life. But then I stopped. I looked down at him, at this complicated, broken man who was trying so hard to piece himself back together. And I realized my new life didn't have to be a lonely one. I was just about to get a coffee, I said, my voice soft. I nodded towards the new cafe. Would you like to join me? He looked up at me, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes and erasing some of the sadness that lived there. It was the first real smile I had ever seen from him. Yes, Laura, he said, his voice full of a quiet, simple warmth. I would like that very much. He stood up, and we walked across the street together. We weren't a billionaire and his victim. We weren't a tragedy. We were just a man and a woman, walking into the sunshine, about to share a cup of coffee. It wasn't an ending, and it wasn't a fairy tale. It was something quieter and more real. It was a beginning. What did this story teach you about forgiveness? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.